The October wind rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office on the 42nd floor, and Giovanni Castellano did not move. Behind him, the city of Boston spread out like a circuit board of lights, the harbor black and endless, and the cold seeped through the glass like a living thing trying to get in. He sat perfectly still, his shoulders broad enough to fill the space between the leather chair's armrests, his dark suit tailored to the millimeter, his knuckles white where they gripped the mahogany desk. On the 3 monitors in front of him, frozen images flickered and played in sequence. Security footage. Time-stamped. Dated. Irrefutable. The same woman. For times this week. 11:27 p.m. Service entrance of Mercy Care Home, where she worked the graveyard shift changing bedpans and spooning soup into the mouths of the dying. She emerged alone, her uniform rumpled, her hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch the exhaustion across her face, and she carried a canvas bag that she brought back empty. Empty! Giovanni's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed harder into the wood until the knuckles threatened to split the skin. In his world, the world he had built with his own hands from the rubble of his father's violence and his childhood hunger, this was the language of betrayal. The midnight movement. The hidden cargo. The careful steps designed not to be seen, the exit through the service entrance instead of the lobby, the bag that disappeared into the night like contraband, like evidence, like a message being passed to someone who should not receive it. Vinny stood in the doorway, a man with a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone and shoulders that seemed to belong to someone 7 feet tall. He had been with Giovanni for 9 years and understood the meaning of silence. "Want me to follow her again, boss?" The words hung in the cold air between them. Giovanni did not turn around. His eyes remained fixed on the monitors, on the image frozen at 11:49 p.m. showing the woman turning left onto Causeway Street, her small frame swallowed by the darkness, her canvas bag tucked against her ribs. "Tell me what you know." Vinny stepped inside and closed the door with a click that sounded like a chamber ceiling. His voice came out steady, professional, empty of emotion the way all his reports came out. "Aria Morgan. Single mother, no. 8 years ago she filed a restraining order against a man named Douglas Hale. Landlord. Owns the building where she rents. The restraining order was granted and then lifted 6 months later when she withdrew the complaint. She's worked at Mercy Care Home for 3 years, double shifts, 5 days a week. She's never missed a day. Her sister's in the hospital, cardiac condition, expensive surgeries, medical bills stacking up. Her pocket money is $34. $34 to her name, boss. Everything else goes to her sister's treatment and back rent. $34. Giovanni closed his eyes. In his pocket at that moment was a gold watch worth more than most people's cars, and a platinum American Express card with no limit. He had not worried about money since he was 16 years old, since the day he killed his father's business partner and took the gun money and never looked back. But he could remember $34. He could remember the smell of it, desperation wrapped in paper and fear. He could remember counting coins in the dark. And Emma. She came home 3 weeks ago talking about the woman who saved her, Vinny said. Pulled her from the street just as a delivery truck came around the corner. The woman took the impact. Could have died, boss. According to the school report, the truck's bumper would have crushed her. Emma's still having nightmares about it. Every night she asks if the pretty lady is coming back. Giovanni opened his eyes. On the center monitor, the frozen image showed Aria's face in 3/4 profile, caught by the security camera as she passed under the building's exit light. Her eyes were hollow. The kind of hollow that comes from surviving on almost nothing for so long that you forget what fullness feels like. But there was something else there too, something the cameras could not quite capture, something that made his daughter call her name in her sleep. She's carrying information to someone, Giovanni said. It was not a question. Or she's carrying something else, Vinny said quietly. Giovanni turned then. His lieutenant knew better than to speak unless he was certain, and Vinny's certainty was the only thing Giovanni trusted besides his own instincts. Both were screaming now, but they were screaming in different directions. What do you mean? The bag, Vinny said. It's never the same. Different sizes, different colors. Sometimes she carries it like it's heavy. Sometimes like it weighs nothing. And she never goes to a dead drop. She walks. She walks for exactly 47 minutes, and then she sits on a bench in Boston Common, and she sits there until 2 in the morning, and then she walks back. Always the same bench. Always alone. No one picks up the bag. No one meets her. Silence fell. The kind of silence that happens in rooms 42 stories above the ground, where the city's noise cannot reach. Giovanni stood. He was 6'1" and moved with the deliberate grace of a man who had learned very young that every motion matters, that hesitation is death, that speed without control is just panic wrapped in violence. He walked to the window and looked down at the harbor. The water was black and endless, and somewhere in the darkness was the bench where a woman with $34 to her name sat in the cold waiting for something that never came. Why would she save my daughter, he said. Because that's what she does, Vinny said. She saves people. She works with the dying. She gave her sister her own bone marrow 7 years ago when her sister needed a transplant. She volunteers at the shelter on Sunday mornings. I have 5 guys following her movements and they all say the same thing: she spends every minute that isn't work trying to help someone else. Then why the midnight movements? Why the bag? I don't know yet, Vinny said. But boss, I know betrayal. I've seen you handle betrayal my entire career. This doesn't smell like betrayal. This smells like desperation. This smells like someone doing something they think they have to do because they think they have no other choice. Giovanni's reflection stared back at him from the black glass, a ghost superimposed over the city. Behind him, Vinny waited. The lieutenant had never once in 9 years suggested that Giovanni's instinct was wrong, and he was not doing so now. He was simply laying down the facts the way an archaeologist lays down artifacts, letting Giovanni arrange them into meaning. The bag carries something 3 times a week, Giovanni said slowly. To the same location. To someone she doesn't speak to. To something that matters enough that she risks her safety walking through Boston at midnight. And she does this because she thinks she has no other choice. He turned back to his lieutenant. Find out what choice she believes she doesn't have. Find out what's in that bag. And find out why my daughter loves her enough to whisper her name like a prayer. Vinny nodded and turned to leave. And Vinny, Giovanni said. His voice came out the way it always came out when he was about to do something that would change the course of events, flat, final, like a door slamming shut behind you. Nothing happens to her. Nothing. I want her under protection, not surveillance. She doesn't need to know about it, but if anyone even looks at her too long, I want to know about it. Vinny's scar deepened as he nodded. Yes, boss. The door closed with the same click, and Giovanni was alone again with the monitors and the darkness and the frozen image of a woman who had thrown her body in front of a truck to save a child that was not her own. He reached out and touched the screen where her face was frozen, her eyes hollow and brave and desperate. 21 days earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon when the autumn light fell through Boston like amber, none of this was true yet. On that afternoon, Aria Morgan did not know that a man named Giovanni Castellano existed. She did not know that her daughter, no, not her daughter, the daughter of the most powerful criminal in New England, had wandered 3 blocks from Riverside Elementary School and straight toward a delivery truck moving at 35 miles per hour. She did not know that she had exactly 12 days before an eviction notice with red ink numbers would transform from a threat into a reality. And she did not know that the canvas bag would eventually carry something that would make a man who had built an empire from violence and fear completely still. But the delivery truck was moving now. And Aria Morgan's body was about to move faster than thought, faster than self-preservation, faster than the mathematics of survival that had ruled her life for 8 years. The smell of diesel exhaust filled the street. The sound of a horn, sharp and terrible. And the moment when everything changed arrived wearing the face of a child she had never met. October air bites down on Commonwealth Avenue at 3:12 in the afternoon, the kind of cold that finds its way through fabric and settles against skin like a warning. Dead leaves scatter across the crosswalk in front of Riverside Elementary School, tumbling in patterns that mean nothing and everything at once. Aria Morgan walks past the playground where children laugh in voices that sound like they belong to a different world, a world where families have money for winter coats that actually keep the cold out. She has $34 in her pocket. That is all the money left in the world after she paid rent 3 days late, after she bought her sister the medication that costs more than her daily food budget, after she counted and recounted the numbers knowing they would never add up. The eviction notice folds against her ribs inside her purse, red ink bleeding through the paper like a wound that will not stop weeping. 12 days. That is what the notice says in numbers that feel like they are written in her own blood. 12 days before the locks change and her belongings sit on the sidewalk and Douglas Hale, the landlord with hands that move too slow and smiles that move too fast, collects what little she has left. She should not be here, walking past schools where other children have mothers who do not work double shifts. She should be at Mercy Care Home, but her 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift ended and the manager gave her leftover soup in a container that still smells like the nursing home kitchen, and Aria ate it standing in the employee bathroom because she had not eaten since yesterday. The cold soup sits now in her stomach like a stone. The sound comes first. A horn, sharp and terrible, the kind of sound that makes the body move before the mind understands why. A delivery truck is accelerating through the intersection, its driver checking his phone instead of the crosswalk, his foot pressing down instead of up. The truck is moving at 35 miles per hour. That is a fact that matters. That is a speed that kills. And in the crosswalk, reaching for a backpack that has tumbled into the street, is a child. Dark curls, a blue jacket, one hand stretched toward something that will never be as important as her life. She cannot be more than 10 years old. She is the only thing moving toward the truck instead of away from it. Aria does not think. Thinking takes time. Thinking is a luxury she does not have. Her body moves like it has been waiting her entire life for this exact moment, like all 8 years of invisible suffering have been building toward 3 seconds of clarity. She lunges forward, her legs moving faster than her mind, her arms already opening to wrap around the child, to become a shield made of bone and desperation and the last piece of her that still believes that maybe, just maybe, she can save something. The metal screams past her. She feels it like a blade wrapped in ice, tearing through the air where her shoulder blade was a moment before, ripping her jacket, the smell of diesel exhaust so thick she can taste it like blood. The world spins. She is on the asphalt. The child is beneath her. The truck's emergency brake echoes through the street like a death scream. Silence comes next. Terrible, thick silence. The kind of silence that means the accident happened and the child is alive. Aria's hands shake as she pulls back, checking the child for injuries with fingers that do not feel like her own. The girl's eyes are wide, her face pale, but there is no blood. There are no broken bones. She is breathing. She is alive. The backpack spills its contents across the street, a lunchbox, a math workbook, a stuffed rabbit with one eye missing. "You are okay, sweetheart," Aria whispers, and the girl grabs her, her small arms tight around Aria's neck, her entire body trembling. "You are okay. That is all that matters. You are okay. You saved me," the child says into Aria's shoulder. "You saved me. You saved me." The truck driver stumbles out of the cab, his face the color of old newspaper, his mouth moving but no words coming out. A crowd gathers like ghosts, people who were invisible a moment before now desperate to be seen, to be part of this moment, to be able to say they witnessed something that mattered. Someone calls 911. Someone else is crying. A woman puts her hand on Aria's shoulder, and Aria flinches because touch always means danger, always means pain is coming. But this touch is gentle. This touch is awe. The girl pulls back just enough to look at Aria's face. "What is your name?" "I am Aria," she says. "What is yours?" "Emma," the child says. "My name is Emma Castellano." That name does not mean anything to Aria. Not yet. Not for several more hours. Meanwhile, across the city in an office on the North End where floor-to-ceiling windows frame Boston like a painting, Giovanni Castellano's phone is ringing. His security team calls from the school. They have already reviewed the footage. They know what happened. They know that a woman pulled his daughter back from the edge of death by 2 inches, maybe less. They know that she is brave or stupid or both, but they do not know which yet. Giovanni listens to the details with his body absolutely still. This is what his men have learned to recognize as danger. When he does not move, when he does not speak, when his breathing stays perfectly level, that is when the world should fear what comes next. "Find her," he says into the phone. His voice is like thunder across still water, deep and solid like an oath. "I want everything. Where she lives. Where she works. Who she sees. Where she buys her coffee. I want to know the color of her eyes and the size of her shoe. I want to understand her completely." The officer on the phone hesitates. "Sir, she saved your daughter." "She is not." "That is exactly why I need to know everything," Giovanni says. "Because people do not save children from trucks without calculation. Find the calculation." He ends the call and stands. Through his office window, the Charles River moves like a living thing, dark and slow and deliberate. His lieutenant, Luca Rossi, enters without knocking. This is permitted. Luca has worked for Giovanni for 16 years. He is the kind of loyalty that comes from understanding what happens to people who betray him. He is tall and lean, with silver beginning to thread through his dark hair, and his left hand is missing 2 fingers from a message he delivered to someone who did not understand the value of Giovanni's friendship. "The child?" Giovanni asks. "Safe. Being checked at Mass General. No injuries." "The woman?" "Aria Morgan. 28 years old. Single mother." Luca pauses. "Cares for the elderly at Mercy Care Home. She lives in a building owned by Douglas Hale. She has debt of approximately $125,000. She has no family. She has no police record. She has nothing except a sister with medical bills she cannot pay." Giovanni turns to face him. His face is unmarked except for a scar running from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, white against his olive skin, old enough to be from childhood, fresh enough to still tell the story of someone who nearly died. "Nothing?" "Nothing that matters," Luca says. "She is invisible. She has built her life around not being seen." Something moves in Giovanni's chest, a feeling he has not allowed himself in 15 years. He pushes it away immediately. He returns to the window. "My daughter will not stop talking about her," he says. Emma described this woman the way other children describe fairy tales. As if she were magic instead of simply present at the right moment. Emma's voice echoes through his memory. He has not let himself remember his childhood in years, the small apartment, his father's fists, the nights he pretended to sleep while violence happened on the other side of a thin wall. He has not let himself remember the faces of the adults who walked past his bruises and saw nothing. He has built an empire so that no one could hurt Emma the way his father hurt him. So that no one could walk past her suffering and be indifferent. And a woman with nothing, a woman with $34 in her pocket and an eviction notice with 12 days printed in red ink, threw her body in front of a truck for a child she had never met. "Bring her to me," Giovanni tells Luca. "Tonight. 9 p.m. The warehouse." "And Luca, she does not need to know anything. Tell her nothing. Let her fear me. Let her think I am dangerous." "You are dangerous," Luca says. "But I am not what she should be afraid of," Giovanni says. "That is what I need to know." 1 week passes. 7 days of waiting, though Giovanni does not think of it as waiting. Waiting implies passivity, and there is nothing passive about what he is doing. He has people watching her movements. They report back in measured voices, speaking of a woman who wakes at 4 a.m. and works until the sun disappears and then comes home to an apartment so small that the kitchen and bedroom are the same room. They report that she buys groceries once a week on Thursdays, always the cheapest items, always calculating something in her head. They report that she touches the eviction notice 17 times a day, pulling it out of her purse and staring at the red ink as if she can change the numbers through force of will. Giovanni listens and does not move and does not speak. On the 7th day, just after the sun falls, he makes the call himself. He has a specific voice for this, not the voice he uses with his men, which carries the weight of authority. This is a colder voice, the voice of someone who does not need to shout because the world has already learned to listen. Aria answers on the 3rd ring. "Ms. Morgan," the voice says. "This is Giovanni Castellano. You may have heard that name. I am calling because you have something that belongs to me. You have my gratitude, and my gratitude is a currency more valuable than money. I would like to discuss this in person. Tonight. 9 p.m. Dockside Imports, North End. You will come alone." The line goes dead. Aria sits in her kitchen, which is not a kitchen but the corner of her room where she keeps a hot plate and a refrigerator that hums like a dying animal. She thinks about hanging up and calling back. She thinks about not going. She thinks about the girl's arms around her neck, the girl saying her name like it was the most important word in the English language. She thinks about the eviction notice, 9 days remaining. She thinks about the name everyone in Boston knows. Giovanni Castellano. The man who owns half the city's nightlife and none of its soul. The man about whom police have 17 open investigations and 0 convictions. The man who moves through the underworld like ice, and where he has been, things freeze and break. She puts on her only decent jacket, the one without holes in the elbows. She borrows 50 cents from her sister's jar of emergency change, money she will need to pay back when the eviction comes and there is no emergency anymore. She calls a taxi and watches the meter climb like a countdown to disaster. The Dockside Imports warehouse sits dark against a darker sky, a building that has stopped pretending to be anything other than what it is. Above her, the October wind moves through the city like a blade wrapped in ice, cutting through everything that stands in its way. Aria steps out of the taxi and immediately feels like she has made a terrible mistake. Behind her, unseen, 12 men in black SUVs have stopped 3 blocks away, watching to ensure she arrives intact. Giovanni has commanded this. He has also commanded that they not interfere. He wants to see her face when she understands who she has saved. The warehouse door opens before she can knock. The concrete steps descended into darkness, each footfall echoing like a countdown. Aria's shoes, worn at the heels, repaired twice with duct tape, caught on the 3rd step. She steadied herself against a wall that wept moisture in the October cold. Above her, the warehouse door sealed shut with a sound like a coffin lid closing. 9:03 in the evening. She knew the exact time because her phone had buzzed with a late fee notice from the electric company. 12 cents. She did not have 12 cents. The underground poker room opened before her like a mouth-swallowing light. Cigar smoke hung in layers, thick enough to cut, and beneath it the smell of money, that particular scent of new $100 bills that Aria had only ever encountered in dreams. The space sprawled across what must have been the entire basement, green felt tables stretching like a landscape of sin, stacks of cash arranged in clear bands, towers of chips catching the fluorescent glare. Everything was precise. Everything was controlled. She counted 6 guards, all watching her with eyes that had learned to see without expression. At the far table, Giovanni Castellano sat motionless. 42 years old but carrying the weight of someone who had lived through centuries of violence. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely that it moved with him like a second skin, the fabric worth more than 6 months of her old rent. His white shirt hung open at the collar, revealing the dark hair on his chest, a single gold chain catching light. His wrists displayed a watch that could have funded her sister's entire medical treatment, and his hands, large, scarred, capable of tenderness or devastation, rested flat on the table. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that made him look like a man who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink first. Vinny and Luca flanked him like bookends. Both wore black, both stood perfectly still. Giovanni did not stand when she approached. The slight was intentional, a demonstration that he controlled every variable in this space, including her. She felt the weight of it like a physical thing pressing down on her shoulders. "Miss Morgan," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, each word measured and deliberate. "Sit." She sat in the empty chair across from him, the green felt between them like a border between two worlds. Her hands folded in her lap because if she left them exposed, he would see them shaking. Her back throbbed where old scars pulled against the cheap fabric of her blouse, 8 years of pain, written in marks that no one was supposed to see. "You saved my daughter," Giovanni said, studying her face the way a predator studies prey before deciding whether the hunt is worth the effort. His eyes were dark gray, the color of storm clouds, and they held the absolute certainty of someone who had never been told no. "Yes." Her voice came out steady. She would not apologize for that. She would not soften it or qualify it or diminish it, and something in his expression shifted, a microscopic change, like ice cracking beneath deep snow. "Why?" The question hung in the smoke between them. "She needed help." "You did not know who she was." "You did not know who I am." It was not a question. "Does that matter?" The room became very quiet. Aria heard the distant sound of rain beginning to fall outside, percussion against the warehouse roof. She heard the careful breathing of Vinny and Luca, men trained to notice everything. She heard the whisper of Giovanni's fingers moving across the felt. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a stranger who did not recognize him back. He reached beside him and slid a folder across the green felt. The movement was casual, but Aria understood that nothing this man did was casual. She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Photographs spilled across the felt. Douglas Hale entering buildings at 3 a.m. Douglas Hale with men whose faces she did not recognize, their expressions predatory. Women whose faces were deliberately blurred but whose postures screamed fear, hands drawn up, shoulders hunched, the language of bodies that had learned to make themselves small. Beneath the photographs lay financial documents. Banks in the Cayman Islands. Ledgers with women's names and dollar amounts. Property transfers. Shell companies. A network so vast and intricate that it took her breath away. And there, in photograph after photograph, Cordelia Blackwood. Elegant. Smiling. Present at every transaction, every meeting, every deal. Her hand on Douglas's arm. Her signature on documents. Her voice audible in the recordings that Giovanni had somehow obtained. "Your landlord and his business partner," Giovanni said, his eyes never leaving her face. "They are not what they appear. Douglas Hale is not simply a man who rents apartments. He is a man who traffics women. He preys on desperation. He creates debt that can never be repaid and then uses the debt as leverage for exploitation. Cordelia Blackwood enables this. She launders the money. She provides the network, connections to wealthy men who will pay for what Hale provides." Aria's vision blurred. "I need something from you," Giovanni continued. "Evidence. Testimony. The names of other women. Documentation of what you have witnessed in that building for 8 years. She tried to speak and found that her throat had closed. 8 years. 8 years of scars. 8 years of Douglas's hands, Douglas's voice, Douglas's absolute certainty that she belonged to him because he owned the building and therefore owned every soul within it. "What do you want from me?" Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible beneath the sound of rain intensifying against the roof. "Bring me proof. Help me build a case. Give me what I need to destroy them both." Giovanni leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, something almost like humanity crossed his expression. "In return, your debt disappears. All $125,000. The eviction notice becomes irrelevant. Your sister's medical bills," he paused, and Aria realized with a shock that he knew, he had known all along, "will be handled." "Why?" The question burst out of her involuntarily. "Why would you care what they have done? I am nobody. I have nothing. I cannot repay you. You threw yourself in front of a truck for my daughter. Giovanni's voice roughened, took on an edge like broken glass. You did not know her name. You did not know who she was. You did not know who I am. And still you acted. You think that is nothing? You think you are nobody. Around him, Aria felt his men holding their breath. This was not how their boss spoke. This was not the tone of ice, the voice that commanded fear. This sounded almost like something human, something wounded. I need 7 days, Giovanni said. Can you do this for me, Aria? She heard her name in his mouth and understood that he had already learned everything about her. Where she worked. Where she lived. The sister she cared for. The debts. The desperation. Every vulnerability mapped and catalogued. Yes, she heard herself say. I will help you. But what she did not say, what lived in the secret spaces of her mind, was that once this was finished, once she gave him what he needed, she would disappear. Men like Giovanni Castellano did not need her damaged, her broken, her marked by 8 years of cruelty in the hands of men who saw her as less than human. His daughter deserved better than a woman who carried the scars of Douglas Hale's violence. Good, Giovanni said, and he reached across the table, not to touch her, but close enough that she felt the gesture like a prayer. You are not invisible anymore, Aria. And you are not alone. 3 blocks away, 12 men in black SUVs sat waiting in the rain, watching the warehouse in trance, making certain she arrived intact. Giovanni had commanded this. He had also commanded that they not interfere unless her life was in danger. What he did not command was that they not witness the way he looked at her, the way his expression transformed when she spoke her name aloud for the first time. In the years that would follow, those men would remember this night. They would remember the moment their boss, the man built from violence and ice, the man who had never shown mercy to anyone, the man who trusted no one, showed something that looked dangerously like hope. The rain fell harder outside, drumming against the warehouse roof like a warning that no one heeded. The apartment door exploded inward at 6:06 in the morning, and Aria jolted awake to the sound of her lock splintering against the frame. She had fallen asleep on top of the blankets, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her phone clutched in her hand like it might save her. 3 men filled the doorway, Douglas Hale first, moving with the casual ownership of someone who had paid for every brick and beam in this building, his 2 companions behind him like dogs that had learned to walk on hind legs. Douglas was 53 years old but built like someone who paid for violence as easily as other men paid for coffee. His suit was tailored grey wool, his shoes Italian leather, his watch the kind that cost more than Aria's annual rent. A thin scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jawline, the mark of a man who had once been young and careless enough to get hurt. He no longer looked careless. Good morning, Aria, Douglas said, his voice like honey poured over broken glass. I have a key. I own this building. I own you. She scrambled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs like something trapped. The apartment was small, bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and there was nowhere to go. The fire escape outside her window was 3 stories up and rusted through. She had counted the exits 1,000 times in 8 years, always looking for escape routes that did not exist. Get out, Aria said, but her voice shook. The words came out barely louder than breathing. Douglas smiled. Eviction is tomorrow. But I have another option for you. He closed the apartment door behind him with deliberate slowness. The sound of the latch was final, like a judge's gavel. I have clients. Wealthy clients. They would pay well for you. Very well. The 2 men blocked the doorway. One of them, thick-necked, with a tattoo of a scorpion crawling up his neck, cracked his knuckles. The other just stared at her with the flat effect of someone who had stopped feeling anything years ago. Aria's blood turned to ice. This was the question she had wondered about in the dark hours of 3 a.m. This was what happened to the other women. The ones whose names vanished from the tenant lists. The ones who stopped coming to work at the nursing home. The ones no one seemed to remember except as whispered rumors and unanswered phone calls. No, Aria said. The word came out stronger this time. It was the only word she had left. Douglas crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into the soft skin on the inside of her wrist, pressing against bruises that were already 8 years old. Pain shot up her shoulder like lightning. He pulled her close enough that she could smell the cologne he wore, something expensive and suffocating, and she realized with a sickening clarity that he had chosen this moment deliberately. He had let her sleep. He had let her wake into helplessness. "You think you have a choice," he whispered. "You think someone is coming to save you, Aria? No one is coming. No one even knows you are here." But someone did know. Someone had been watching. Someone had taught her something in those midnight meetings in the warehouse, in the spaces between cigar smoke and dangerous men, that survival was not the same as surrender, that saying no meant nothing if you did not have the strength to back it with steel. She clawed at his face. Her fingernails caught his cheekbone and came away with blood. Douglas howled, releasing her arm to touch his face, and in that split second of freedom, Aria grabbed the lamp from her nightstand and threw it. The bulb shattered. The cord tangled around Douglas's neck as he turned toward her. "Get her," he snarled. The scorpion-tattooed man crossed the room. His hand came up open, and he backhanded her across the face with the casual force of someone swatting a mosquito. Her head snapped sideways. The taste of blood flooded her mouth, copper and iron and the salty warmth of her own injury. She tasted what 8 years felt like. She tasted surrender. But she did not surrender. She kicked at him, connected with his knee, heard something crunch that might have been bone or ligament or the sound of her own defiance breaking. He fell backward, cursing, and Aria dove toward the kitchen. She grabbed a knife from the block on the counter, a chef's knife with a 10-inch blade, and held it in front of her like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Because it was. Douglas pulled something from inside his jacket. The steel caught the early morning light coming through her apartment window, and Aria saw it clearly, 8 inches of polished blade, a pocket knife designed by someone who understood that elegant violence was more terrifying than crude force. He smiled at her, and his smile was the smile of a man who had never met a boundary that cost him anything to cross. "I am done being patient with you," Douglas said. He moved toward her with the confidence of a predator who has already won. "You are going to work for me, Aria. You are going to do exactly what I tell you to do. And if you refuse, you are going to disappear. Like the others." The knife in his hand rose. Aria raised hers to meet it. That was when the gunshots came through the wall. 3 shots, muffled by a suppressor, punching through the drywall from the apartment next door. The scorpion man fell backward with blood blooming across his chest. The other man dove behind the kitchen counter. Douglas spun toward the door, his knife still raised, his face transforming from predator to prey in the space of a heartbeat. The door burst open a second time. 2 men in dark tactical gear filled the frame, weapons raised with the calm precision of professionals. Behind them came more, an entire team moving with the synchronized grace of a choreographed violence. Giovanni Castellano was not among them. Instead, the lead agent wore an FBI windbreaker and carried federal warrants in her left hand while her right hand never left her weapon. "Douglas Hale," the agent said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You are under arrest for human trafficking, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder." The scorpion man was gasping on the floor, his hand pressed to his chest, his eyes wide with the realization that he was dying. No one moved to help him. No one was supposed to. He was collateral damage in a machinery of justice that had been set in motion 4 months ago, when Aria first agreed to help. Douglas did not resist. He dropped the knife. It clattered on the linoleum floor and skidded across the apartment, coming to rest against the refrigerator. His face went pale, not from fear but from the dawning understanding that his money, his connections, his carefully maintained network of power and leverage meant nothing against the federal government. The agent approached him, weapon still raised. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The familiar cadence of Miranda rights filled the apartment. Aria stood in the kitchen, still holding the knife, still tasting blood, still unable to move. One of the agents, a younger man with kind eyes, noticed her and lowered his weapon. "It is over," he said gently. "You are safe now." But she did not feel safe. She felt untethered, as if the weight of 8 years had been holding her together, and now that it was gone, she might dissolve into nothing. The agent who was reading Douglas his rights finished the final line. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. They were steel and final, and they represented something Aria had stopped believing in a long time ago, that the world had systems designed to protect people like her. "Where is Giovanni?" she heard herself ask. The young agent glanced at his partner, then back at Aria. 3 blocks away. We are keeping him out of the building so the arrest is clean. He wanted to be here, but... Aria did not wait for him to finish. She moved past the agents, down the hallway, down the stairs with her legs moving on their own momentum. The morning air hit her face cold and sharp, and she realized it was raining, that same cold October rain that had drummed against the warehouse roof what felt like 1,000 years ago. 3 blocks away, Giovanni Castellano stood in an unmarked sedan, watching her building. When he saw her emerge, he opened the car door and stepped out. He was 42 years old, 6 feet 1 inch tall, broad-shouldered in the way of men who had built empires with their hands and their will. His suit was charcoal, his shirt open at the neck, his face carved from stone and suffering and an absolute refusal to let the people he loved be destroyed. He walked toward her in the rain. He did not run. Everything about Giovanni moved with deliberate control, each step measured, each gesture calculated. But his eyes were breaking apart. "Are you hurt?" he asked. No, Aria lied. She was hurt in ways that would take years to understand, in ways that physical bandages could never repair. But she was alive. That had to be enough. He reached her in the rain and pulled her close without asking permission. His hand shook. In the sedan behind him, Vinny and Luca watched from the front seats, and in that moment, both men understood something they had spent 15 years learning was impossible, that their boss, the man built from violence and ice, the man who had never shown mercy to anyone, was capable of breaking. "I promised you," Giovanni said, his voice low and rough like stone grinding against stone, "that you would never be alone again." Aria pressed her forehead against his chest and heard his heartbeat, steady and alive and real. Inside the building, federal agents were photographing evidence. In a downtown office, more agents were executing a second warrant on Douglas Hale's business. And in Beacon Hill, in a mansion that cost $4 million, Cordelia Blackwood was still asleep, unaware that her world was about to collapse. The rain fell harder, drumming against the pavement like a countdown to something neither of them could stop. 3 days after the trial ended, Aria stood in her new apartment with a suitcase open on the bed. The space was small but clean, sunlight cutting through windows that actually closed properly, a luxury she had not known she was missing. She folded a shirt methodically, each crease a measured decision, each movement deliberate, because if she did not stay focused on the mechanics of packing, her hands would shake apart. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility, which made it worse somehow. Giovanni had insisted on paying the deposit, the first month's rent, had sent Luca to stand in the leasing office until the papers were signed. She had not argued because she was too tired to argue, and because the safe house they had kept her in during the trial felt like breathing through a cloth. Here, at least, the walls did not pulse with the memory of tape recorders and federal agents and Douglas Hale's lawyer trying to make her sound like a liar. Footsteps approached from the living room. She heard the sound before she saw him, Giovanni's footsteps on hardwood floor, unhurried, purposeful, the footsteps of a man who had never learned to tiptoe through anyone's life. He stopped in the doorway and held up the letter. It was worn. She could see that immediately, the pages creased from repeated folding and unfolding, the edges soft from handling. Her goodbye letter. The one she had written the night before the federal raid, when she was certain that helping Giovanni would destroy him, that her presence in his world was a contamination spreading from her skin to everything he loved. "You are leaving." Giovanni's voice was controlled, but she heard the fracture underneath, the anger and the hurt braided together like a rope pulled too tight. Aria froze with a sweater halfway into the suitcase. She did not turn to face him. You were not supposed to find that. Luca saw it on your desk when we moved your things. He gave it to me. Giovanni stepped into the room. He was still wearing his suit from the courthouse, charcoal with a white shirt open at the neck. There was a weight in his eyes that had not been there before the trial. You were going to disappear. Yes. She turned then because there was no point in hiding now, in maintaining the fiction that this moment was not about to crack her open. Giovanni held her goodbye letter in his fist like it was a weapon that had already been fired. I wrote about why, Aria said. Her voice was trembling, barely a whisper. You read it. I did. He unfolded the pages slowly, deliberately, and read aloud, in another life, maybe I could have been someone worthy of the way you looked at me. But in this life, I am 8 years of scars. I am a woman whose name means shame in this city. I am damaged goods, and you deserve better than the destruction my presence would bring. He lowered the letter. You think you are broken. I am terrified, she said. It was not an answer to his question, but it was the truth. So am I. Giovanni closed the distance between them in 5 measured steps. He did not touch her, not yet. Instead, he spoke with the precision of a man choosing words he did not normally use, words that cost something to say aloud. You threw yourself in front of a truck for a child you did not know. You wore a federal wire against Douglas Hale knowing he could kill you at any moment. You fought him with a knife at your throat and you survived. You are the strongest person I have ever met, and you dare to tell me you are broken. Aria's breath hitched. Tears had started falling, she could not remember when. I am damaged goods, she whispered. So am I. Giovanni's voice dropped, rough as gravel. My father beat me unconscious when I was 9 years old because I cried when he killed our dog. I clawed out of poverty by doing things I will never speak of. I have killed men, Aria. I run an empire built on violence and fear. If you are broken, then I am shattered into pieces so small they will never fit back together. But Emma does not see that when she looks at me. She sees her father who loves her. And when she looks at you, she sees the woman who saved her life. That is the truth that matters. He reached for her hand. His palm was warm, his grip careful, like he was holding something fragile that might dissolve at the slightest pressure. I was going to disappear so I would not endanger you, she said. So my broken parts would not destroy you. Giovanni raised her hand to his chest. She felt his heartbeat beneath her palm, steady, alive, real. Listen to me, he said. You are not broken. You are brave. And brave people stay. They do not run. They do not disappear. They stand and they fight and they let people love them even when love terrifies them. He paused. Will you stay? Outside, Boston was waking up to spring. The sound of traffic hummed through the windows, distant and ordinary, the sound of a city that did not know that everything had just changed in a small apartment with an open suitcase on the bed. Aria looked at the letter still crumpled in his other hand. She thought of the woman who had written it, terrified and certain that she was worthless, convinced that the most loving thing she could do was vanish. That woman felt like a stranger now. Or perhaps she felt like a ghost finally becoming solid, finally being seen. Yes, Aria said. I will stay. Giovanni's smile broke open his face like sunrise, and for the first time in months, she understood that healing was not the absence of scars. It was the decision to stop hiding them. Over the next months, the shape of Aria's life transformed in ways she had not thought possible. The trauma therapy started in April, held in an office that smelled like lavender and forgiveness. Her therapist's name was Dr. Reeves, a woman with kind eyes who never flinched when Aria described what Douglas Hale had done to her, what Cordelia Blackwood had whispered into the ears of every landlord and employer in Boston. Giovanni had funded the therapy without asking, slipping the insurance papers into her folder one morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. When she confronted him about it, he simply said, "You gave me back my daughter. The least I can give you is a chance to heal." She did not return to Mercy Care Home. Instead, Giovanni offered her a position managing his legitimate businesses, the shipping companies and restaurants that fronted his empire, the places where money moved in clean, documented lines instead of black briefcases and unmarked envelopes. She refused at first, terrified of his world, convinced that proximity to him would drag her back into the violence. Then he showed her the books. They sat in his office on the 40th floor of a building that overlooked the harbor. The morning sun turned the water gold. Giovanni pulled up spreadsheets on his computer, women in entry-level positions, pathways to management, health insurance that covered not just physical injuries but mental health care, therapy, trauma counseling. You could help others like you, he said quietly. Build something real from the systems that destroyed you. She accepted. Emma arrived every weekend without fail, her small body crashing into Aria's office at the shipping company with drawings and news about her second-grade class. One afternoon in late May, she brought a picture she had drawn in art class, 3 figures standing under a yellow sun. A tall man in black. A little girl with a smile. A woman with long hair. That is Papa, Emma said, pointing with a crayon-stained finger. That is me. That is you. Aria felt something crack open in her chest, the kind of cracking that hurt and healed at the same time. What is this picture? She asked carefully. That is my family, Emma said matter-of-factly. Then she returned to coloring, unaware that she had just reshaped the world. That night, Giovanni cooked dinner in his kitchen, a skill from childhood poverty, when survival meant knowing how to make a meal from nothing. Aria sat at the counter watching him move through sauce and pasta with surprising grace, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he stirred and tasted and adjusted the seasoning. You do not have to do this, she said. I know. But I want to. He plated the food carefully, served her first, then himself. They ate in comfortable silence while the city lights of Boston spread below like a blanket of stars. When they finished, Giovanni refilled her wine glass and said, carefully choosing each word. In the letter you wrote, you said that meeting me reminded you goodness exists. You reminded me of the same thing, Aria. You reminded me that I am not just the violence my father taught me. That I am not only the empire I built. That I am something else when I am with you. She could not speak. Her throat had closed. You do not have to answer now, Giovanni continued. But I need you to know, I see you. All of you. The scars, the strength, the fear, the courage. The way you love Emma without reservation. The way you survived things that would have broken most people into permanent pieces. I am not going anywhere. 6 months later, in April again, Aria stood in the Mercy Care Home parking lot as a donor, not as an employee. The therapy had worked, not completely, perhaps healing never works completely, but enough that the scars on her back no longer defined every waking moment. They were still there, still visible in certain lights, but they had transformed into something else. A map of survival. A proof that she had endured. Emma ran across the parking lot in a yellow dress, 7 years old turning 8, her laughter a sound like bells. Did you see my art project? She crashed into Aria's legs. Mrs. Chen hung it in the hallway. Giovanni followed at a distance, allowing them their moment, his dark suit a contrast against the spring sun. Something had softened in him over these months, a gentleness that came from choosing to stay, from building something real instead of just maintaining an empire. That night, with Emma asleep upstairs, Giovanni slid a drawing across the dinner table. The same one from her second-grade class. Above the 3 figures, in careful crayon, MY family. I know we are not there yet, he said. I know you are still healing. But this is what I see when I look at the future. This. You, Emma, a family built not from obligation, but from choice. Aria thought of the woman she had been 6 months ago, $34 in her pocket, an eviction notice in red ink, a goodbye letter half written. She thought of Douglas Hale in federal prison serving 40 years. She thought of Cordelia Blackwood stripped of her power, her inherited wealth seized and distributed to the survivors she had helped destroy. 37 women had received compensation. 37 lives were rebuilding. I am not running anymore, Aria whispered. Giovanni's smile broke like sunrise across his face. The storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. If this story moved you, share it. Someone in your life is fighting a battle you cannot see. Drop a like if you believe in second chances. Subscribe because tomorrow we are bringing you another story of courage. Comment below, what would you have done in Aria's place? I will see you in the next one.